Hello, my name is Danielle Stevenson, and I have decided to do my presentation on the Caspian Sea. I was inspired by Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe series. The Caspian Sea actually is bordered by 5 different countries, although it's kind of between Asia and Europe, but as you can see in this map, it's by Russia. It's between 36 and 47 degrees north latitude and between 46 and 54 degrees east longitude. Its average depth is 690 feet. However, there are some deep areas at 3,360 feet deep. So there are 3 main parts to the Caspian Sea. There's the northern part, the middle part, and the southern part. And each of them is actually quite distinct in their different characteristics. Actually, pretty much every slide we're going to talk about is going to have a pretty significant difference on how the north, mid, and south are different. The north part is very shallow. It only has 1% of the volume of all of the Caspian Sea. Yeah, I said 1%, right? And it's between 13 to 26 feet deep, which is not deep at all. It has very, very low salinity, because it has the rivers coming into it. Yeah, the 3 rivers are the Volga, the Ural, and the Trek rivers. This is the Volga River in this picture. I had no idea that this was by the Caspian Sea, but I have quite a bit of interest in Russia, so I was like, oh my god, this is a really cool coincidence. The middle area of the Caspian Sea is actually has 33% of the total volume. The average depth is about 620 feet. However, there are some spaces that are as deep as 2,600 feet. So already you're starting to see big difference, 13 feet or 2,600 feet. And then the southernmost section is even more different than that. The average is I don't remember what I said. Yeah, it has an average depth of sorry, I don't know my notes but it's a lot deeper, and that's part of what makes it so different than a lot of the other seas, but its volume is 66% of the whole of the Caspian Sea. There is a lot of difference in the salinity as well, as I talked about, because most of the rivers come into the north part, and so its salinity is only 9.2%, whereas both of the other sections are closer to 13%. As we talked about, 3 rivers come into it. It has a relatively stable crust, but it has a thick sedimentary layer to it. So there is a lot of oil in the Caspian Sea, and of course, we're the Russians are pumping it out and selling it, which when I'm saying oil, I'm talking a lot of oil, 1,000,000 tons of oil they're actually taking out from the sea every single year. But there's still 750 million tons left, which I just thought that was really crazy. There is a lot of, as we talked about before, there's a lot of variance in the salinity. By the rivers, it's 2 grams per liter, but some of the more southern areas, as we talked about before, can get up to 13. The Caraboga's gold boof is also really, really unique because it's part of the shallow areas. And so it has like a lot of evaporation that occurs. And so it actually has like 350 grams per liter of salt, which is actually like kind of crazy, especially considering, we were talking about 2 grams per liter a second ago. There is a lot of different concentration in the actual, like, the different salts themselves in the sea, and part of this is because it hasn't actually been connected to the ocean in a very long time. And so whereas like all of the ocean is going to have like some mixing, the Caspian Sea is like quite standalone. And then here's actually like a graph over time of the salinity in the bottom left, winter versus summer, and the different different areas. There was a little bit of like mixed reviews on the oxygen. One place I read said that there was high vertical mixing, but then another place said that there was actually poor vertical mixing, just because there isn't like all as bad of the currents coming from like a lot of different places. And I always present too long. So there are a few different sediment types. In the north, it's more of a fine grain, but because it's shallow, the waves are able to have that much more of an impact, and so you're able to see like uniform like ripples. Whereas like the coastal areas have shell deposits, and so they have like oolitic sand as well. Whereas some of the deeper areas are very calcium rich. Some of the sediment sources are from the Volga River, which comes from the Russian platform. There's also like a lot of mountain ranges that a lot of the sediment comes from: the Caucasus Mountains, the Alborz, and the Kopetaga, whatever. Sorry, I'm not very good at pronouncing. There's also like different like structures based on the areas as well. As we talked about, the more north is more stable, whereas the middle has like a gentle eastern gradient, and then there's like an abrupt like drop off in the west. Some of the geologic features consist of the Absaron Peninsula, the Terran platform, which is basically like a swell up of the region to the east, and then there's the whole greater like Caucasus like geosyncline of that like whole mountain range. So unlike the ocean, it is endoheric, and it has more of like a basalt crust, and there's a lot more variance, as we discussed, in the height itself. So because even though it is like the biggest sea, which is not really a sea, it's technically a brackish lake, but because it is less volume than the ocean, there is going to be a lot more temperature change, and so it can be freezing in the north, especially because it's shallow, so it's capable of like freezing. But then it gets as hot as like 35 degrees Celsius, and so not a lot of animals are able, or plants for that matter, are able to withstand that. And so they've also had to like adapt to the differences in how the salinity works. And so pictured is an invasive species of jellyfish, and then also pictured is the sturgeon. The sturgeon are a keystone species. They've adapted the ability to withstand the weird salinity a little bit better. And so they are a keystone species. The sturgeon and the seal both act as like a stabilizing force to help keep things balanced, because there are like a lot of like competing resources down far below, like on the bottom level of the trophic pyramid. And so if they can keep like the primary consumers limited, then things don't get out of hand and mess up the whole pyramid. Yeah, it's limited. Then here's my food web, and there's a seal. Oh yeah, and then so for the producers, there's basilarophyte and other phytoplankton, but there's also aquatic plants like the eelgrass. Primary consumers, there's mostly zooplankton species. The Dressana polymorpha is a zebra mussel that inhabits the Caspian Sea. The Gemerdus leucostris is a crustacean. Cleopanella caspia, called the Caspian kilka, is a planktivorous fish. Rudolus caspicus, called the Caspian roach, is a small predatory fish. The top predator is the Caspian seal and the Caspian sturgeon, as I've talked about previously. Thank you so much.